Sarah walked into the big hotel with tired feet. She was 23 years old and wore a black and white uniform that was a little too big for her slim body. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her face, though pretty, showed signs of stress and lack of sleep. Tonight, she was working as a server at a fancy charity event. It was her third job this week. "Don't forget to smile," her boss reminded her as he handed her a tray of small food items with names she couldn't pronounce. Sarah nodded and put on her best smile. She needed this job. Her college bills were piling up, and her small apartment rent was due in 3 days. Her parents back in the small town couldn't help. They had their own bills to pay. As she moved around the room offering food to rich guests, Sarah couldn't help but notice one man. He stood out not because he was handsome. He wasn't, at least not in the way young men were. He was old, maybe in his late 70s, with thick white hair and a face marked by years of living. But there was something about the way he looked at people when they spoke. He really listened. "His name is Harold Thompson," another server whispered to Sarah. "Worth about $12 billion. Owns companies all over the world." Sarah nodded but didn't really care. Rich people came and went at these events. They all looked the same to her after a while. Later that night, as the event was ending, Sarah was picking up empty glasses when she accidentally bumped into someone. A glass fell and broke on the marble floor. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, looking up to see the old billionaire, Harold Thompson, standing there. "It's quite all right," he said with a kind smile. "These things happen." Sarah knelt down to pick up the broken glass. To her surprise, Harold Thompson got down on one knee too, despite his expensive suit, and helped her. "You don't have to do that, sir," Sarah said, embarrassed. "I want to," he replied simply. His hands were old but strong as they carefully picked up the broken pieces. When they finished, Harold looked at Sarah more closely. "You look tired," he said. Sarah was taken aback by his directness. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just a long day." Harold nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I've had many of those, though probably not the same kind as yours." He paused. "I'm Harold Thompson." "I know," Sarah said before she could stop herself. He laughed, a warm sound that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Of course you do. And you are?" "Sarah Chen." "Well, Sarah Chen, would you like to have coffee with me sometime? When you're not working, of course." Sarah stared at him. Was this old billionaire asking her on a date? She almost laughed but stopped herself. He seemed sincere. "Why?" she asked before she could think better of it. Harold seemed to appreciate her honesty. "Because you're the only person in this room who didn't try to impress me all night. And because you have kind eyes." Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to say no. What would people think? But another part of her was curious about this old man who helped pick up broken glass and noticed her tired eyes. "Okay," she said finally. "Coffee." Harold smiled and pulled out a business card from his pocket. It was simple white with just his name and phone number. "Call me when you're free." As Sarah watched him walk away, she had no idea that this moment would change her life forever. She slipped the card into her pocket, thinking it would make a funny story to tell her roommate later. How a poor college student met a billionaire who was old enough to be her grandfather. What Sarah didn't know then was that in 6 months, she would become Mrs. Harold Thompson. And 1 week after that, she would discover something about her new husband that would shake her to her core. 3 days passed before Sarah called Harold. She almost threw his card away many times. What would a young woman like her talk about with an old billionaire? But curiosity won in the end. When she called, Harold himself answered the phone, not a secretary or assistant, as she had expected. "I was hoping you would call," he said, his voice warm. Sarah could hear the smile in it. They met at a small coffee shop near Sarah's college. Sarah arrived early, wearing her best jeans and a clean blue sweater. She had expected Harold to come in a fancy car with bodyguards. Instead, he walked in alone, dressed in simple pants and a button-up shirt. The only hint of his wealth was the expensive watch on his wrist. "Thank you for meeting me," Harold said as he sat down across from her. He ordered a plain black coffee. Sarah got the cheapest item on the menu. "Why did you really ask me here?" Sarah said after a few minutes of small talk. "You must meet interesting people all the time." Harold looked at her for a long moment. "Most people want something from me," he finally said. "Money, connections, status. But you looked at me like I was just another person. That's rare in my life." Sarah didn't know what to say to that. She sipped her coffee. "Tell me about yourself," Harold said. "What are you studying?" "Medicine," Sarah replied. "I want to be a doctor, but it's expensive. I work 3 jobs just to pay for classes." "That's impressive," Harold said, and he seemed to really mean it. "Why medicine?" No one had asked her that in a long time. Sarah found herself telling Harold about growing up in a poor neighborhood, about the free clinic that had helped her mom when she was sick, about wanting to give back. Harold listened, really listened. He didn't check his phone or look around the room. His eyes stayed on her face, and he asked questions that showed he was paying attention. Before Sarah knew it, 2 hours had passed. Harold paid for their coffees despite her protests. "May I see you again?" he asked as they stood outside the coffee shop. Sarah surprised herself by saying yes. Their second date was at a small restaurant. Their third was a walk in the park. By their fourth meeting, Sarah had stopped thinking about Harold's age or money. She just enjoyed talking to him. On their 5th date, Harold took her to a special place, a hospital wing with his name on the building. But it wasn't just any hospital wing. It was a free clinic that treated people who couldn't afford health care. "I built this 10 years ago," Harold told her as they walked through the halls. Doctors and nurses greeted him by name. Patients looked at him with gratitude. Sarah watched as Harold spoke to a young mother whose child was getting treatment for asthma. He remembered the child's name. He asked about her husband who had been looking for work. "You really care," Sarah said when they were alone again. "Of course," Harold replied. "What's the point of having money if you don't use it to help others?" That was the moment Sarah's feelings began to change. She had expected Harold to be like other rich people she had served at events. Proud, selfish, looking down on others. But he was different. Over the next few weeks, they spent more and more time together. Harold showed Sarah his world. Charity galas where he raised millions. Board meetings where he pushed his companies to be more ethical. His simple home that was big but not flashy. And Harold entered Sarah's world too. He met her roommate and didn't mind their tiny apartment. He ate at the cheap places she liked. He listened to her worries about school and bills. People talked, of course. Her friends warned her that Harold must have bad intentions. His business partners raised their eyebrows when he brought Sarah to events. But Sarah and Harold didn't care what others thought. Something real was growing between them. Something neither had expected. Then one evening, as they sat on a bench watching the sunset, Harold took Sarah's hand in his wrinkled one. "I know this might seem strange," he said quietly. "I'm old enough to be your grandfather, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. I think I'm falling in love with you, Sarah." Sarah looked into his kind eyes and realized something that shocked her. She was falling in love with him too. 3 weeks after Harold told Sarah he loved her, they sat in his garden surrounded by roses. The evening was warm, and the sky was turning orange and pink. Sarah had just finished telling Harold about her day at school when he suddenly became quiet. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing the serious look on his face. Harold took a deep breath. "Sarah, I need to ask you something important." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small blue box. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She knew what was inside before he opened it. "I know we haven't known each other very long," Harold said, his voice a little shaky. "And I know there are many reasons why this might seem crazy to others. But I've lived a long life, and I've never met anyone like you." He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring with a diamond that caught the evening light. "Sarah Chen, Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Sarah stared at the ring, then at Harold's face. His eyes were full of hope, but also fear. Fear that she might say no. Fear that he had asked too much. People will talk, Sarah said softly. They'll say I'm only marrying you for your money. Harold nodded. Yes, they will. Does that bother you? Sarah thought about it. No, she said firmly. It doesn't. Because we know the truth. And what is the truth, Sarah? Harold asked, his eyes never leaving her face. The truth is, Sarah said, taking his hand, I love you. Not your money. Not what you can give me. Just you. Harold's eyes filled with tears. Is that a yes? Sarah smiled and nodded. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Harold's hand shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. News of their engagement spread quickly. Sarah's phone rang constantly with calls from friends who couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some supported her. Others warned her she was making a mistake. He's using you, one friend said. No man that rich and old marries someone young without wanting something. You don't even know him, Sarah replied angrily. Her parents were shocked but tried to understand. They asked to meet Harold before giving their blessing. Harold flew them to his home and spent a weekend showing them who he really was. By the time they left, they had given their approval. They could see how much he loved their daughter. Harold's business partners and friends had mixed reactions. Some congratulated him. Others whispered behind his back, saying Sarah must be a gold digger who had tricked an old man. Let them talk, Harold told Sarah when she got upset about the rumors. I'm the happiest I've been in decades. Despite all the talk, Sarah and Harold decided to have a small wedding. Just close family and a few trusted friends. Sarah could have had any dress, any venue, any food she wanted. But she chose a simple white dress and a ceremony in Harold's garden among the roses where he had proposed. The night before the wedding, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of the guest room in Harold's house. They had decided to stay in separate rooms until they were married. Harold was old-fashioned that way. As she looked at the stars, Sarah thought about how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been working 3 jobs and worrying about rent. Now she was about to marry one of the richest men in the country. But it wasn't the money that made her smile as she thought about the next day. It was the thought of waking up beside Harold every morning. It was the thought of building a life with this kind, generous man who saw her for who she really was. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. As Sarah walked down the garden path toward Harold, she saw tears in his eyes. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. You look beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. Sarah squeezed his hands. Are you ready for this? Harold nodded, his eyes full of love. I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know I was waiting for you. They said their vows under an arch of white roses. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Harold kissed Sarah gently. Everyone clapped. Sarah Chen was now Sarah Thompson, wife of a billionaire. But as they walked back down the path together, she wasn't thinking about his money. She was thinking about their future together, the life they would build. She had no idea that in just 1 week, she would discover something about her new husband that would change everything. The first week of Sarah and Harold's marriage was like a dream. They spent their honeymoon at Harold's beach house, walking on the sand at sunset and talking for hours. Harold was gentle and kind, never pushing Sarah for anything she wasn't ready for. They returned to Harold's mansion after 7 wonderful days. It was a big house with many rooms, but it felt warm and lived in, not cold like some rich people's homes. This is your home now too, Harold told Sarah as they walked through the front door. You can change anything you want. Sarah smiled. I like it just the way it is. Harold had to go back to work the next day. He ran many companies and had important meetings. Sarah decided to use this time to learn more about her new home. She explored the gardens, met all the staff, and looked at the art on the walls. Then she found Harold's home office. It was a big room with bookshelves, a large desk, and a view of the garden. Sarah didn't want to be nosy, but she was curious. This was where Harold worked when he was home. She walked around, looking at the books and awards on the shelves. On his desk was a picture of them from their wedding day. Sarah picked it up and smiled. Harold looked so happy in the photo, his eyes bright with joy. As she put the picture down, she accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. They fell to the floor, spreading across the carpet. "Oh no," Sarah said, quickly kneeling down to pick them up. Most of the papers were business reports with numbers and charts. Sarah didn't understand them. But as she gathered the papers, she found a folder she hadn't seen before. It was dark blue with gold letters that said, "Last Will and Testament." Sarah froze. This was Harold's will. She shouldn't look at it. It was private. But something made her open it. Maybe it was because she was his wife now. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Whatever the reason, Sarah opened the folder and began to read. The first thing she noticed was the date. The will had been changed just 3 days before their wedding. Sarah's heart beat faster. Had Harold changed his will because of her? Many people would think so. They would think Sarah had married Harold for his money, and now she would get everything when he died. But as Sarah read more, she was shocked. Harold had not left his money to her. Instead, he had given most of his $12 billion to charities and research centers, places that helped the poor, fought diseases, and made the world better. For Sarah, he had left only enough money to finish her education and live comfortably. Not billions, not even millions, just enough. Sarah sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, feeling confused. Why had Harold changed his will right before their wedding, but not to give her his money? Then she saw another folder under the will. This one was marked Medical Records, Prague 8. Sarah knew she shouldn't look. These were Harold's private papers, but she was his wife now. If something was wrong with him, she needed to know. With shaking hands, she opened the folder. Inside were doctors' reports, test results, and letters. Sarah read them slowly, trying to understand the medical terms. Then she saw words that made her blood run cold. Terminal cancer, 6 months to live, no treatment options. Sarah's hand shook so hard she dropped the papers. Harold was dying. He had cancer, and the doctors said he had only 6 months left to live. The room seemed to spin around her. Harold, her new husband, the man she loved, was going to die, and he hadn't told her. Sarah looked at the dates on the medical papers. Harold had known about his cancer for over a year. He had known he was dying when he met her, when he fell in love with her, when he asked her to marry him. He had kept this huge secret from her. Why? Sarah heard the front door open downstairs. Harold was home early from work. She could hear him calling her name. She looked down at the papers spread around her. What should she do? Should she confront him about what she had found? Or should she pretend she didn't know her husband was dying? Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and began to gather the papers. She had to talk to Harold. She had to know why he had hidden something so important from her. As she heard his footsteps on the stairs, Sarah took a deep breath. Their life together had just begun, but now she knew it would be cut short. Everything had changed in just a few minutes. Harold appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, what are you doing in here?" Then he saw the open folders on the floor. His face went pale. "Oh, Sarah." Harold stood in the doorway, his face pale. His eyes moved from Sarah to the medical papers on the floor. "You weren't supposed to find those," he said quietly. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this a secret?" Harold walked slowly into the room and sat heavily in his desk chair. He suddenly looked every one of his 78 years. "I was afraid," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of what?" Sarah asked, tears filling her eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't marry you if I knew?" Harold nodded slowly. "Yes, that's exactly what I thought." "You didn't trust me," Sarah said, hurt in her voice. "You didn't think my love was real. Can you blame me?" Harold asked. I'm an old man with a lot of money. People have pretended to care about me before, just to get my wealth. Sarah sat down across from him, pushing away the papers on the floor. But I never asked you for money. I never even let you pay for my school. I know, Harold said. That's why I fell in love with you. You saw me, not my bank account. Then why hide this? Sarah held up the medical report with trembling hands. It says you have 6 months to live. 6 months, Harold. Were you ever going to tell me? Harold's eyes filled with tears. I was going to tell you after we had some time together. I wanted a few months of happiness before. He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. You should have told me, she said, her voice softer now. I would have married you anyway. I love you, not how long we have together. Harold looked into her eyes. Really? You would have tied yourself to a dying old man. I did tie myself to an old man, Sarah said with a small smile. The dying part wouldn't have stopped me. Harold pulled her into a hug, his shoulders shaking as he cried. Sarah held him tightly, her own tears falling onto his shoulder. I'm sorry, Harold whispered. I should have trusted you. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah wiped her eyes and picked up the will from the floor. I saw this too, she said. You changed it right before our wedding. Harold nodded. Yes. I wanted to make sure you were taken care of, but not in a way that would make people think you married me for money. You left most of it to charity, Sarah said. That's just like you. Harold took the will from her hands. Does it bother you that you won't be a billionaire when I'm gone? Sarah shook her head. No, I never wanted your money. But why did you leave me anything at all? Because I love you, Harold said simply. And I want you to finish becoming a doctor. You'll help so many people, Sarah. That's worth more than any amount of money I could leave you. Sarah felt a fresh wave of tears. This man, this wonderful man who had so little time left, was still thinking about how to help others. What do we do now? Sarah asked, sitting back down. How do we? I don't even know how to say it. How do we deal with the fact that I'm dying? Harold finished for her. His voice was stronger now. We live, Sarah. We make the most of whatever time we have left. Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. No more secrets. No more secrets, Harold promised. He stood up and held out his hand to her. Starting right now, we face everything together. Sarah took his hand and stood up. As they left the office together, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would make Harold's remaining months the best of his life. She would show him every day how much she loved him. What she didn't know then was that Harold had one more secret, one that would change everything once again. But for now, they walked hand in hand down the stairs, united in their love and in the knowledge that their time together would be short. Sarah felt a new strength inside her. She would be strong for Harold. She would help him through whatever came next. And Harold felt a weight lift from his shoulders. No more lies. No more hiding. Whatever time he had left, he would spend it honestly with the woman he loved. Over the next month, life changed for Sarah and Harold. Now that his secret was out, Harold started treatment for his cancer. The doctors had said it wouldn't cure him, but it might give him more time. Sarah went with him to every appointment. She held his hand during painful treatments. She made notes when doctors spoke and asked smart questions. Her medical school knowledge helped her understand what was happening to her husband. You don't have to do this, Harold told her one day as they drove home from the hospital. You didn't sign up to be a nurse. Sarah looked at him with loving eyes. I signed up to be your wife. In sickness and in health, remember. At home, Sarah made changes. She learned to cook foods that would help Harold stay strong. She moved their bedroom downstairs so he wouldn't have to climb stairs when he felt weak. She read medical books late into the night, looking for anything that might help him. Harold watched her with wonder and love. He had never expected to find someone who would care for him this way. Not because he was rich, but because she truly loved him. You're missing school, He said one morning when he found Sarah sleeping at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical papers. "I can go back later," Sarah said, yawning. "You're more important right now." But Harold wouldn't hear of it. The next day, he hired a nurse to help with his care. "I want you to keep studying," he told Sarah firmly. "Becoming a doctor is your dream. I won't let you give it up for me." Sarah argued, but Harold was stubborn. In the end, they'd made a deal. Sarah would go to school 3 days a week, and the nurse would care for Harold those days. The rest of the time, Sarah would be with him. During this time, Harold also started teaching Sarah about his business. He showed her how his companies worked. He introduced her to his most trusted employees. He explained how his money helped fund hospitals, schools, and research around the world. "Why are you telling me all this?" Sarah asked one night after a long meeting with Harold's lawyers. Harold smiled sadly. "Because someone needs to make sure it continues after I'm gone. Someone who cares about helping people, not just making money." Sarah realized that Harold was trusting her with his life's work. It was a huge responsibility, but it showed how much he believed in her. As weeks passed, Harold had good days and bad days. On good days, they would walk in the garden or drive to the beach. Harold would tell Sarah stories from his long life. She loved listening to him talk about the world he had seen and the lessons he had learned. On bad days, when pain kept Harold in bed, Sarah would read to him or simply sit beside him, holding his hand. Sometimes, they didn't speak at all. Just being together was enough. One evening, Sarah came home from school to find Harold sitting at his desk, writing something. He quickly put it away when he saw her. "What's that?" Sarah asked, curious. "Nothing important," Harold said, but his eyes didn't meet hers. Sarah remembered his promise of no more secrets. "Harold, what are you hiding?" Harold sighed. "It's a surprise for you. For later." Sarah wanted to ask more, but the look on his face stopped her. Whatever this new secret was, it seemed important to him. That night, as they got ready for bed, Sarah noticed Harold taking a phone call in private. When he came back, he looked different. There was a strange light in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, worried. "Yes," Harold said, smiling. "Everything is fine." But Sarah wasn't convinced. What was Harold hiding now? After everything they had been through, why would he keep another secret? She didn't push him that night, but as Sarah watched her husband sleep, she made up her mind to find out what he was hiding. No more secrets, he had promised. She would hold him to that. What Sarah didn't know was that Harold's new secret would change everything she thought she knew about their future together. It wasn't a bad secret this time. It was something that would bring hope when they needed it most. 2 more months passed. Harold's health went up and down like a roller coaster. Some days he seemed almost well, with pink in his cheeks and energy in his step. Other days, he could barely get out of bed. Through it all, Sarah stayed by his side. She had become good at reading his body for signs of pain or tiredness. She knew when to push him to eat or take medicine, and when to just let him rest. Harold's business partners and friends were amazed at the change in Sarah. The young woman they had thought was just after Harold's money had turned into a fierce protector and loving wife. Even the most doubtful among them had to admit they were wrong about her. "You're remarkable," one of Harold's oldest friends told Sarah after watching her gently help Harold through a board meeting. "He's lucky to have found you." Sarah smiled but shook her head. "I'm the lucky one." As for Harold's secret, Sarah hadn't forgotten. She noticed more private phone calls, more papers quickly hidden when she entered her room. One day, she found a ticket to a tropical island in Harold's desk drawer. It was dated for 3 months in the future. "What is this?" she asked Harold at dinner that night, showing him the ticket. Harold looked surprised. "You've been snooping." "No more secrets," Sarah reminded him. "That was our promise." Harold sighed and put down his fork. "It's a surprise I've been planning. For you." "A trip?" Sarah asked, confused. "But the doctors said you shouldn't travel." "It's complicated," Harold said, looking uncomfortable. I can't explain yet. Sarah tried to be patient. Maybe Harold was planning something special for her, knowing he wouldn't be around much longer. The thought made her sad, but she decided to let him have this secret, for now. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her studies. It was hard to focus on books and tests when her husband was sick, but Harold insisted. "Your brain is too good to waste," he told her often. "The world needs doctors like you." One evening, Sarah came home from a late class to find Harold sitting in the garden. It was a cool night, and she worried he would catch cold. "You should be inside," she said, putting her sweater around his shoulders. Harold patted the bench beside him. "Sit with me. Look at the stars." Sarah sat down and looked up. The night sky was clear, filled with thousands of twinkling lights. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Harold said softly. "Yes," Sarah agreed, laying her head on his shoulder. "I used to think that when people died, they became stars," Harold said. "My mother told me that when I was a boy." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Were they finally going to talk about his death? "I don't want to be a star," Harold continued. "I want to stay right here with you." "I want that too," Sarah whispered, squeezing his hand. Harold turned to look at her, his eyes bright in the darkness. "What if we could have more time? What would you say to that?" Sarah's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I've been keeping something from you," Harold admitted. "Something big." "Tell me," Sarah said, sitting up straight. "No more secrets, remember." Harold took a deep breath. 2 months ago, my doctor called. They wanted me to try a new treatment, something experimental. It wasn't approved yet, but they thought it might help. "And?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. "And I've been getting this treatment in secret," Harold said. "I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to give you false hope." Sarah stared at him. "Is it working?" Harold smiled, and in the moonlight, he looked younger somehow. "My last scan showed the tumors are shrinking. Not gone, but shrinking." Sarah couldn't speak. She threw her arms around Harold and held him tight, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked when she could finally speak. "I was afraid to hope," Harold said. "I didn't want to disappoint you if it didn't work." "So you're not dying? At least not right away?" Sarah asked, still holding him. "The doctors say they don't know," Harold replied honestly. "It could give me months or years. They just don't know." Sarah laughed through her tears. "That's the best news I've ever heard." But even as she celebrated, a small voice in her head wondered. If Harold was getting better, what was the ticket to the tropical island for? What other secrets was her husband still keeping? The news about Harold's improving health changed everything. Sarah felt like she could breathe again. She smiled more. She slept better. Hope had returned to their home. But Sarah still wondered about the ticket to the tropical island. Why wouldn't Harold tell her about it? What was on that island? She decided to do some research. While Harold was in a meeting one day, Sarah went to his office and looked at the ticket again. The island was called New Hope, and it was in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. Sarah searched for information about the island on her laptop. There wasn't much. Just a small private island with one big house and a medical building. No hotels. No tourists. "That's strange," Sarah said to herself. Why would Harold have a ticket to such a place? She dug deeper and found something surprising. The island was owned by one of Harold's companies. He had bought it 5 years ago and built the medical building there. Before Sarah could learn more, she heard Harold coming. She quickly closed her laptop and pretended to be reading a book. "How was your meeting?" she asked casually. "Good," Harold said, but he looked tired. "The new treatment is working, but it takes a lot out of me." Sarah helped him to the couch and brought him some water. As he rested, she thought about what she had found. Was the island connected to Harold's treatment? Was that where he was getting the experimental medicine? Over the next few weeks, Harold continued to improve. His energy returned. His appetite grew stronger. The doctors were amazed by his progress. "It's a miracle," one doctor told them after seeing Harold's latest scan. "I've never seen cancer respond this way before." Harold just smiled and thanked the doctor. But later, at home, he seemed quiet and thoughtful. "Is something wrong?" Sarah asked as they ate dinner. "You've been so quiet today." Harold put down his fork and looked at her with serious eyes. "I need to tell you something, Sarah. Something important." Sarah's heart beat faster. Was this finally the full truth? "I'm listening," she said, reaching for his hand. "The treatment I'm getting," Harold began, "it's not just experimental. It's revolutionary, something that could change medicine forever." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "It's a new type of therapy that targets cancer cells directly," Harold explained. "It was developed by scientists I've been funding for years. They'd been working in secret because their methods are controversial." "Controversial how?" Sarah asked, worried now. "They use techniques that aren't approved yet," Harold said. "But they're working, Sarah. Not just for me, but for others too." Sarah thought about her medical ethics classes. "Is it legal?" "Yes," Harold assured her, "but it's happening outside normal channels. That's why I've been so secretive." "And the island?" Sarah asked. "New Hope Island." Harold looked surprised. "You know about that too?" Sarah nodded. "I found the ticket. I know the island belongs to you." Harold sighed. "Yes, I built a research center there. That's where the treatment was developed, and that's where I've been going for the most advanced therapies." "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked. "I wanted to protect you," Harold said. "If anything went wrong, if the treatment failed, or if authorities questioned it, I didn't want you involved." Sarah squeezed his hand. "But we're married. Your problems are my problems." "I know that now," Harold said softly. "And there's something else I need to tell you." Sarah waited, not sure what to expect. "In 2 months, I need to go to the island for a final treatment," Harold said. "It's the most important one. The one that could make this remission permanent." "The ticket I found," Sarah said, understanding now. "Yes," Harold nodded. "But there's a risk. This treatment is powerful, but it's never been tried at this level before." "What kind of risk?" Sarah asked, feeling afraid again. Harold looked into her eyes. "It could cure me completely, or it could kill me. The doctors don't know for sure." Sarah felt like the floor had dropped from under her. Just when she thought Harold was getting better, now she learned he might still die. "I won't do it if you don't want me to," Harold said. "We can continue with the standard treatments. I might have a few good years left." Sarah didn't know what to say. How could she make this choice? How could she decide between a chance at a full life for Harold or the certainty of a few more years together? As she struggled with her thoughts, she had no idea that Harold still hadn't told her everything. The biggest surprise was yet to come. For days, Sarah thought about Harold's choice. Should he risk everything on this final treatment? Or should they enjoy the time they had left together? "I need to see this island," Sarah told Harold one morning. "I need to understand what this treatment is before we decide." Harold agreed. The next day, they flew on his private plane to New Hope Island. It was a small, beautiful place with white beaches and green trees. In the center stood a large modern building with the words Thompson Medical Research Center on the front. Inside, doctors and scientists in white coats moved around high-tech equipment. They all knew Harold and greeted him with respect. A tall woman with gray hair approached them. "This is Dr. Eliza Chen," Harold said. "She's the lead scientist here. She developed the treatment that's helping me." Sarah was surprised. "Chen. That's my last name too." Dr. Chen smiled. "It's a common name, but we're not related." Dr. Chen showed them around the facility. She explained the treatment in simple terms that Sarah could understand. It used special cells that could find and destroy cancer without hurting healthy parts of the body. "The final treatment is the most powerful," Dr. Chen said, "but it's also the most dangerous." "What are the chances it will work?" Sarah asked. About 50-50. Dr. Chen replied honestly. Some patients recover completely. Others. She didn't need to finish. Sarah understood the risk. That night, Sarah and Harold stayed in a beautiful house on the beach. As they watched the sunset, Sarah made her decision. You should do it, she told Harold. Take the final treatment. Harold looked surprised. Are you sure? Sarah nodded. I've seen how much you've already improved. And I've met the doctors. They know what they're doing. Harold took her hand. There's something else I need to tell you, my final secret. Sarah's heart sank. What now? After my first 3 treatments, something unusual happened, Harold said. The doctors did many tests, and they found something amazing. What? Sarah asked. The treatment isn't just killing the cancer, Harold explained. It's repairing my body in other ways too. My heart is stronger. My lungs work better. Even my skin cells are acting younger. Sarah stared at him. What are you saying? The doctors think the treatment might be reversing my age, at least physically, Harold said. Not making me young again, but maybe giving me more years than we thought. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Is that possible? They don't know for sure, Harold said. That's partly why the final treatment is so important. It will show if these changes are real and lasting. Sarah's mind raced. If this was true, if Harold could live many more years, their whole future together would be different. Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked. Because I didn't want to give you false hope, Harold said. And because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Harold looked down. Afraid that if you knew I might live a long time, you might regret marrying me. You're so young, Sarah. You could have married someone your own age. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. After everything they had been through, Harold still worried she might not want him if he wasn't dying. I married you because I love you, she said, taking his face in her hands. Not because you were dying. Not because you were rich. Just because you're you. 2 weeks later, Harold went through with the final treatment. Sarah stayed by his side through everything. For 3 days, he was very sick. The doctors weren't sure if he would make it. On the 4th day, Harold opened his eyes. The color had returned to his face. His eyes were clear and bright. How do you feel? Sarah asked, holding his hand tight. Like I've been given a second chance, Harold said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. The doctors ran tests. The cancer was gone, completely gone, and Harold's body showed signs of a man 10 years younger than his actual age. 6 months later, Sarah and Harold returned to New Hope Island. But this time, they weren't there for treatment. They came to turn the research center into a full hospital, one that would treat people from around the world who couldn't afford health care. Sarah had finished her medical degree and now worked alongside Dr. Chen, helping to improve the treatment that had saved Harold's life. As they walked along the beach at sunset, Harold looked at his wife with love and amazement. When you found out I was a billionaire with cancer, did you ever imagine our life would turn out like this? He asked. Sarah smiled and shook her head. Never. But I wouldn't change a thing. Harold pulled her close. They had faced death and secrets together, and they had come through stronger. Now they had a future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. Neither would I, Harold said softly. Neither would I.